welcome to this workshop brought to you by Education Development Trust and the Schools Partnership Programme team. We are going to explore with you in the workshop today what we have been learning about collaboration and resilience, and we've learnt that from our teachers and leaders this year. And what we hope to do is also share with you how you might apply some of this learning to your own context, maybe your own partnership working and your approach to collective school improvement. So just a few words about who we are as an organisation. So Education Development Trust, not-for-profit organisation based here in the UK, although we work across the globe, combining sort of local and global expertise. And the mission is really to transform teaching and learning and strengthen education systems as we do that. As part of our work, we have an internationally recognised research programme, and we make all of our research publicly available to you. You can see that on our website. And what we try and do is make sure that the insights that we get from that research are put into our practice. So we use that to design our programmes both here in the UK and also abroad. So just in terms of what we're doing in the UK, we are one of the largest providers of professional development programmes in the UK, and we've led on quite a wide range of national initiatives. So some of those logos on the screen will be very familiar to you. So Behaviour Hubs, Future Teaching Scholars, Accelerate and Early Years professional development programmes. Schools Partnership Programme, which is the largest collaborative school improvement programme running in the UK, is also on there. And then more recently, we've been appointed as a lead provider for both the early career framework, and we were part of the early rollout of that, and also the reformed suite of national professional qualifications. So we're working with delivery partners all over in various different regions of the country to deliver those programmes, so that you may have come across us through one of those activities. So just a little bit on Schools Partnership Programme then, which is the team that brings you this workshop today. So we have some underpinning principles behind our work, and we strongly believe that schools can improve faster and more effectively if they are working together, but they need a system and a process and a structure to do that. So we try and put that in place with our programme. We want to develop teachers and leaders who can collaborate honestly, and there's no fear of judgment in those partnerships. We want to develop these inclusive learning communities, and ultimately we want children to thrive and the professionals who support them to thrive as well. So the following principles on that slide there, just encapsulated in those 10 headlines, are what are the grounds of where we start from in our programme. So teacher agency and well-being, making sure that we are focused on school improvement, but it is done through collaboration and there is learning at a collaborative level. We are ensuring that it's an inquiry-focused approach, so all our training is about strategies for inquiry, which requires people to really develop levels of trust and transparency and honesty in their working, and we do that through a coaching approach. The whole agenda for the activity in the partnerships is driven by the schools, and we're very strongly of the view that this is not just for head teachers. It is for the whole school. It should involve, wherever possible and wherever appropriate, significant numbers of colleagues, because that is what will lead to the most effective change. And schools joining Schools Partnership Programme can join whatever stage in their school improvement journey they find themselves in. We've tried to make sure that all of our materials that we produce are evidence-based, and we encourage the process of peer review and school improvement through workshops to also be evidence-based. And the view long term is that we work with you for a relatively short period of time, 2 to 3 years, with a view to you developing a sustainable local area model that works for you and your communities. So the purpose of today's session is to share with you what we've learnt over the last 15 months or so during the period of the pandemic in relation to the levels of collaboration in our Schools Partnership Programme groups and their levels of resilience in terms of dealing with everything that has been thrown at them during this very turbulent period. What we're going to do is look at that, our lived experience of the programme, if you like, and explore it in relation to some relevant research, and then think about what that might mean for your own approaches to collaboration, because we know that if you're interested in collaboration, that might be why you're watching this workshop, and that you might have your own approaches. So we're going to end the session with some practical suggestions, just from our lived experience of our programme and talking to our school leaders and teachers as to about how you might think about how your own partnerships and relationships might mature and deepen and add rigour, and with always that focus on making sure we're improving outcomes for children and young people. So just a tad more on Schools Partnership Programme. It is the largest school improvement programme in the country. We work in England and across the whole of North Wales as well, with well over 1,800 schools we have worked with over the last 6 years or so. So all the people who come to us to work on Schools Partnership Programme are groups of schools who've made a commitment to work together. And they want to work with their head teachers, their senior and middle leaders to really develop that culture of collaboration. They may already be coming as a group who have worked together historically over a period of time, but recognise they want to step up. They want to deepen and extend their collaboration, or they might be a relatively new collaboration. And certainly what they're looking to develop is that sort of mutual accountability within and between schools. So in order to support them to do that, we've developed evidence-based inquiry frameworks, and those help people taking part in Schools Partnership Programme to think about that school improvement journey, whatever their focus is. And we've continued to add to that suite of evidence-based frameworks throughout the pandemic, putting together some things that school leaders suggested might be helpful areas of focus. For example, assessing and meeting pupil need, or tackling persistent educational disadvantage. So we are very keen that the peer review methodology is applied with rigour and transparency, and that we can really measure change and improvement as a result of taking part in the Schools Partnership Programme activities. So there is a wider sort of network of colleagues who are also involved in other peer review models. So we came together with a group of those 2.5 years ago now, and wrote a guide with and for the NAHT on the principles of effective school-to-school peer review. So that's downloadable and accessible from the NAHT website. And we also feature in the publication on the right-hand side of the screen there, School Peer Review for Educational Improvement and Accountability. So there are some examples of our practice and some reflections on our programme in that text as well. And the whole core of this is, the reason we do peer review is it helps schools solve pressing issues. And of course, they have faced just very, very significant and incredibly pressing issues across the sector over the last 15 to 18 months during the period of the pandemic. And certainly that's what our head teachers who we have spoken to. So we've spoken to the partnership leads and head teachers taking part in our EVE trial, and we've had ongoing conversations with them right from June last year through to the present day. And this is just a reflection of one of our head teachers saying that in 15 years, they've never quite encountered anything that has challenged their leadership skills, and they know that that's been the same for colleagues. So we have also, as the pandemic emerged and we realised it was going to impact on our work, we went back to some of our founding beliefs, and our approach in the initial design of this programme was to work with some international friends and partners. So we worked with Michael Fullen, whose work on lateral trust-based accountability in Ontario in Canada was of interest to us, and we had a very good relationship with Michael, sharing learning from what we're doing in the UK with him in Canada. We've also had the opportunity to work with both Viviane Robinson, who's based in New Zealand, and Pasi Salberg, who is based in Finland, as you know. They have previously been part of the Inspiring Leadership menu, and we've worked with them on our programme, particularly with Viviane around leaders who have developing an open to learning culture. and with Pazzi on his work on big and small data. So in terms of the work of SPP, Schools Partnership Programme, it's what does that granular small data tell us about improvement and how can we capitalise on it? Last but not least, John Hattie, as you know, is based in Australia. So the teacher and leader agency and that collective teacher efficacy, that is a core element of the Schools Partnership Programme work. And so we felt that all of these things, lateral trusts, being open to learning, looking at big and small data and making sure we really invest in teacher efficacy, we thought that during the pandemic, they really still hold true. So we felt very strongly that our programme could be potentially a support mechanism for our schools during this very challenging time. And as Michael Fullan said in that little quotation bubble there, you know, no one wanted to be isolated at this time, isolation being the enemy of improvement. So throughout the period of the programme, of Schools Partnership Programme, we've been trying to capture our learning. What we've done is we've compiled a series of insight reports, collaborative practice insights, and what they do is they look at the lived experience of Schools Partnership Programme, looking at what they have discovered by talking to some of our head teachers and teachers about working through peer review and school improvement workshops. And then what we've done in these papers is we've then compared that to the wider research findings. So the 4 that you have on screen there, they are available to you. They are on our website, and they are thematically, number 1, around culture. So what is the sort of culture that we need to create, to develop, and what does that need to look like, and how do we behave in that culture if we're going to get the most out of the Schools Partnership Programme and forms of peer review. Number 2 looked at systems and processes around how do we make sure we keep the momentum of the programme going and embed it so that it becomes the way we do things around here. We then also looked in number 3 particularly at the sort of skills and behaviours and the people that are required to sustain the momentum of the programme and to make sure that it is conducted with rigour and it's very efficient. And last but not least, we also looked at how people put evidence at the very heart of this process, both in terms of thinking about when they're doing their reviews, what does the evidence tell us around themes and areas of focus we've chosen, but also in subsequent school improvement activity. So they already exist. They've been around for a couple of years now and are available to you free to download from the website. But we have also developed and are continuing to develop these pieces. So the most recent one, published only a week or 2 ago, is the one which forms the content of the rest of the session today. So we have looked at the extent to which working collaboratively sustains you and ensures that you are resilient in times of significant challenge and crisis. So we're going to talk through a little bit about what is in this new Collaborative Practice Insight report. And again, you'll be able to download that from the website. Just worth noting that there's another one in the pipeline that we hope to publish in the autumn term. And that will be on reimagining. So to what extent does peer review and collaboration help us in terms of innovation and reimagining and redesigning what we do in schools? So do keep an eye out for that in the autumn. So as the pandemic unfolded, we very much kept in touch with our Schools Partnership Programme groups and schools and spent some time asking them some questions around to what extent did being part of a Schools Partnership Programme group help during the time of the pandemic and subsequently, other lockdowns as they've unfolded. And these were some of the headlines that we got back from colleagues that we spoke with. So rather obviously, they said it's just been that mutual support and practical help, just having other people to turn to when faced with rapid decision making on a daily basis and changing policies, that came through thick and fast, particularly in the first lockdown. And what they said was that having, really deep knowledge of each other's schools really helped in that regard. So the fact that they'd already worked together as a Schools Partnership Programme group and had been in and out of each other's schools and undertaken reviews and improvement workshops really helped being able to have very sort of quick and trustworthy conversations very early on. The other thing that was reported to us was that in terms of addressing these shared challenges, but doing so sustainably, being part of a school's partnership program, the training for reviewers had given them confidence to resist quick fixes, so that they were able to be a bit more reflective, look at the evidence, take time, evaluate, and make decisions as a group, rather than jumping onto sort of very sort of quick and what seemed like easy quick fixes. So they felt that the process of being part of peer review had sort of developed that mindset and approach. Quite obviously, there were some people who were just started out on their leadership career in either deputy role or head teacher role, just as the pandemic hit. And they felt very much that the coaching approach, which is inherent in schools partnership program, brought with it an opportunity to support those newly appointed leaders. And then last but not least, those frequent missives from the DFE, changing guidance almost on a daily basis. Our partnership groups reported back that they were in a position to work collaboratively to just unpick what that might mean in their local area. And very often it led them to presenting quite a unified approach across the locality, which for parents was very reassuring. So schools were saying similar messages and sending out similar communications about how, for example, blended learning was going to work, or how key worker provision was going to be provided. And I know some of our schools even joined together to do some of those things collaboratively throughout the lockdowns that they've been through. So what I'm going to do now, colleagues, is just take you through how we think maybe some of the key ingredients of our programme align with what the research might be saying about resilient organisations. So if you read the Collaborative Practice Insight, there is this balance between practitioner experience and what the research says. I'm just going to try and draw together a few messages for you that are in the main text. So one of the key ingredients in our programme is all around relationships and culture. So we focus on this very heavily in the training, when we're training reviewers, and a role that we've created called Improvement Champions. SPP requires an investment by all in those roles to really invest in relationship building and co-creating a collaborative culture. And we knew that without that investment, schools partnership programme wouldn't work nearly so well. And as Jane Creasy, my colleague, says in the little quotation bubble there, we knew that. What we hadn't quite realised was the implications that we were building some organisational resilience at the same time. And certainly Pip, who is one of our head teachers, who's in the other quotation just there, says that, you know, having the honest professional conversations about the challenges of lockdown with a group where she already had these really strong relationships and a collaborative culture gave them real confidence. And she was reflecting that had she not had that, she doesn't know that she would have felt quite so open and quite so confident to work with others outside her peer review group. So another key ingredient we would say can be encapsulated by these 4 C's. So when we were first looking at the response to the pandemic, quite rightly and quite understandably, schools were reporting back to us that we needed to really make sure we were focusing on well-being, both the well-being, you know, of everybody in the school community, leaders, teachers, the children and learners, and of course their families and the wider community. And we came across this free guide from Mercer. It's available open source, on the best practice guide to protecting the mental health of your workforce. And it talks about these 4 C's, and we feel these 4 C's really resonate across our programme. So we think that in terms of your well-being, having a sense of control is widely recognised as being something very key. A sense of control is a real feature of schools partnership programme, where you get a control over the focus for your review, a control over how that is conducted because you set the tone and the style of that across your partnership. and a control over the sense of the key actions you're going to take as a result of the outcomes of the improvement workshop that follows the review. So that real sense of control and just belonging to that community of schools, you know, so a community of schools, and I get to experience positive interactions with other people. Head teachers and school leaders have told us that, you know, their staff have felt pretty isolated over the last year or so. So even though we have been able to return to school because we're working in bubbles, it's not been the same. People have felt genuinely isolated from each other, even within their schools. So to be able to engage in peer review, which we have done virtually, I have to say, more on that in a moment in the workshop, so that you still retain that sense of community is very important. And you feel committed that you're doing something that's really important. Certainly the feedback from the public on the response from the education community was overwhelmingly positive during the periods of lockdown and the pandemic, and people feeling that actually that they were part and contributing to something very important. And certainly that's something that we get back from our schools partnership programme colleagues, that they say they feel they're committed to something very important, and that whilst we're challenged, we're not overwhelmed. So if we feel challenged, but we then experience success as a group, that actually helps our well-being. So overcoming that challenge because we feel supported by our partnership group. So really key ingredients in well-being, but also really key ingredients in schools partnership programme. Another significant element of the schools partnership programme, and this features very heavily in the training that we do, is a focus on candour and trust. So schools partnership programme is a process which it requires those things, but also the act of engaging in it strengthens and develops and hones it. So we thought that's very important to highlight that. And we, in doing so, sort of tasked ourselves with thinking, well, what do we mean by resilience? And the quotation on the screen there by my colleague Maggie Farrer around resilience being more than being tough and thick-skinned, but actually referring to organisations that understand that sharing and reaching out and addressing these things together actually made us more resilient, was something that, you know, we saw our partnership groups doing. They didn't just hunker down and simply try and endure, you know, what was going on around them, as Maggie phrases it there, and that they found that real strength in working together. Now, you know, we can say that as a schools partnership group, but we thought it would be good to test that out. You know, does that manifest itself in other spheres? So we looked at Keith Faratz's work and his colleagues writing in the Harvard Business Review, where he's been looking at the behaviours and characteristics of resilient teams. And it really chimes and concurs with what Maggie's describing there, that resilient teams are those that are willing to admit when something's become really difficult and willing to ask for help. They don't hide the fact they're struggling, but there is this sense of leaning into the partnership and finding challenges and solutions that can be mutually solved. So we felt that the research around resilience in teams and organisations has some real read across to other features of our partnership programme. So the key ingredients that we sort of challenged ourselves with, I guess. So one of the things that we say is a key ingredient in schools partnership programme is a sort of can-do approach, a sort of an approach to risk-taking and innovation. So as a programme team, I guess we sort of said, let's challenge ourselves. Let's make sure that we are also behaving in that way. So as a programme team, we said, right, how can we respond to the impact of this pandemic on our partner schools? And what could we do that's innovative, and how could we adapt our support? So what we did is, working in late summer 2020, we've developed virtual peer review processes and guidances. We piloted that with some schools around the country, and we have continued to support schools who want to engage in peer review despite the rather obvious restrictions around face-to-face meeting. And we just thought we'd share with you, you know, what we learned from that, you know, have a go, innovate, try and test out something new approach. Well, I think one of the things we've learned is you need to be agile, and you need to try to keep looking that step or two ahead in the face of obviously significant challenges. Certainly, when we look at the resilience research in organisations, this also features, and it seems to be key to organisational resilience. Very important to us was to stay true to our principles, and we mentioned that earlier on. But being prepared to test those principles out with new ways of working, challenging our own thinking, challenging our assumptions, and keep asking ourselves, so what's this taught us? We've tried this, what have we learned? What can we adapt or adopt as new practice now that we've been through this experience? So one of the things we're now looking at is how schools can have a blended approach to peer review, which brings the best of the face-to-face model and combines it with the best of the virtual model. So seizing those opportunities, as well as managing all the challenges and the unexpected things that have been thrown at us over the last months. So in the piece, in the think piece that we've written, we've also looked at some research conducted by Deloitte. And this was conducted, a year into the impact of the pandemic, looking at the traits of resilient organisations. Preparedness, adaptability, collaborative approaches, and actually putting in systems for collaborative approaches, being trustworthy as an organisation, and being responsible as an organisation. So if we look at that through the lens of Schools Partnership Programme, we feel that our partner schools who are involved now have, they're more agile and more prepared to plan for different ways of working. And certainly one of our head teachers commented around this adaptability notion, that the core skills of being a good reviewer or a good improvement champion in the SPP training were really good skills and approaches to have when dealing with the pandemic. So they gave leaders confidence and a willingness to be very adaptable very quickly. Obviously building in processes that allow for collaboration, so that collaboration is a way of working rather than something just nice to do occasionally. And certainly our partner schools have done that in significant amounts over the last 15 months or so, and being able to trust each other and lean on each other in difficult times. And then the last bit about sort of being responsible and being committed to equity and inclusion, because our programme is very much about teacher voice and collective teacher efficacy and involving teachers and giving them agency in school improvement. That certainly has helped, and schools have been able to consult with their teachers and their support staff in making some of these very rapid decisions they've had to undertake because of the pandemic circumstances. So in looking around at the sort of research on resilience, we came across this piece of work, and ironically, this started before anybody had heard of coronavirus or COVID-19 pandemics. So this group of schools who are based in the States were looking at what it means to be a resilient school. And of course, they've had ample examples of testing out that over the period of the pandemic. So they've been looking at those characteristics and looking at, and this sort of chimes quite well with the Deloitte research and the other stuff that I mentioned a moment ago from Ferrazzi around how resilient schools are very prepared, but they're also very agile. They have accessible plans and confident leaders who are prepared to say, here's the outline plan, but we're going to refine it as we go. And their schools are populated with teachers and indeed students who feel equipped to deal with uncertainties. And so this is ongoing research. I'm sure we will keep a very interested eye on this as this project develops. And so, can schools be nimble by design? Can they be resilient by design is what this is trying to answer. What would we need to put in place? So we're going to be learning from this international research as we continually refine our programme. So just to conclude then, what I'm going to do now is share with you some insights from our leaders and teachers about, if they were talking to you face to face, what would their top tips be in terms of using a peer review methodology to strengthen your collaborative relationships. And we know that many schools are in all sorts of forms of collaborative relationships. So their first top tip is make sure the core purpose of why you're doing this is really explicitly demonstrated and that everyone really, really understands that. And in order to do that, you'll probably need to articulate that as some core principles underpinning what you're doing and why you're doing it. And certainly we've spent time over the last 6 years making sure that our principles are really hardwired and embedded in our model so that you can see them in the training and you can see them in the behaviours of schools going away and undertaking the reviews and the workshops. So, the example there, if one of your principles around peer review is it's inclusive, then how is it inclusive? How are you designing it in such a way that it is explicitly inclusive? And talking of being explicit, being really explicit about this is the way we're going to work. This is the behaviours we expect. And this is how this is going to work for us, and we're going to hold each other to account for that and make sure that we don't stray from those principles and behaviours. So most of our schools partnership programmes, and some folk have been working with us on this for 5 years now, would say that it is a continuous learning process. So be prepared to constantly refine and tweak and improve your approach so that you get better and better at doing the peer review processes, and indeed better and better at sharing that learning so that everyone across the partnership improves. In terms of choosing an area of focus for the review, in our model, we certainly don't look at school improvement across a very wide range of things in one review. It's very sharp, it's very focused, and it's very precise and specific. Feedback from our schools is the sharper the focus, the better the review, because that guides the evidence collection and it certainly guides the follow-up activity as well, which forms a feature of our programme. So in order to do that, schools need to be really honest. You need to pick something that is going to really help you. This needs to be something that you genuinely want to solve and you don't know how to do it. So a great peer review is revelatory. And will tell you things that you weren't even aware of in your own school and help you see things from a different point of view. And certainly we don't want to pick something safe. We don't want to pick something where we sort of already know what the problem is and what we're going to do about it, because that doesn't take us very far. In terms of the continuous learning as a partnership and reflecting and reviewing that, we've built in our programme a check-in. And all of our peer review groups say this is a really important step in the process. Peer review is not an event, it is a continuous process. So we've suggested that approximately 3 months after the review, there is a check back in, and we've got some guidance for our partnership groups about how that is conducted. And then the last thing, don't even think about doing this unless you have built in those systems and processes to make sure that it is sustainable and it will happen. There are so many of our schools partnership programme groups who say to us, well, we've had school peer review on our top to-do list for quite some time, but it kept dropping off, and we had a few false starts. And very often those false starts were because they didn't put in the systems and processes to make sure it was sustainable and it happened. So that's where working as a schools partnership programme group of schools, obviously the structure of our programme certainly provides that for you, and you can adapt it over time. And I think their advice would be enjoy it, be professionally curious, be open to learning both in your own school and through reviewing others. That's certainly a feature. Everyone who is a reviewer says they learn a huge amount from reviewing somebody else's school, as well as conducting and hosting the review in their own school, and make sure you have fun with it. So if you are interested in joining a peer review community, or you just want to find out more, there are a number of ways that you can get involved with us. So in the first instance, there's a whole load of free stuff that you can access whether or not you're part of the schools partnership programme sort of groups that I've been talking to you about. So the collaborative practice insight reports I've mentioned, there is all our international research, some case studies and some interviews with school leaders, little short 5-minute interviews with serving school leaders who've got experience. And we also conduct and host open source webinars, free to access to people, and we record those and upload those to our website. So there's a sort of suite of resources available to you, and some of those have been themed very specifically in terms of responding to the pandemic. So as I mentioned earlier, recovery curriculum is one, certainly assessing and meeting need when children return to face-to-face teaching, and tackling persistent educational disadvantage. If you're just interested in sort of just following us and seeing what we get up to, then do feel free to follow us on Twitter at eddevtrust_SPP, and engage with us and interact with us through that way. Also, you can sign up to a newsletter, and that will make sure that if we have got some national practice sharing webinars with guest speakers, you would be able to join in with those. So that might be worth doing, and you can do that by going to our website and signing up for the newsletter. And of course, just talk to us. You know, if you want to have a conversation about peer review and what we're learning, or if you're interested in Schools Partnership Programme in any way, shape or form, the generic email to contact us is on the screen there, with partnerships@educationdevelopmenttrust.com. So colleagues, I'm just going to conclude with, you know, a slide that's just got all our contact details on there, and to say that we are continuing to learn. Schools Partnership Programme, I started with working on the programme with colleagues 5.5 years ago. It has evolved every year that I have been working on it, and we continue to learn, we continue to look at the research, we continue to work with school leaders and teachers to develop our materials and our practice. And we would seek to continue to do that. Obviously, the pandemic has thrown some curveballs at all of us in terms of how we respond, and we think we've tried to embed those in our future thinking. As I said, there's a future collaborative practice insight coming in the autumn term, and that will be on reimagining innovation, sort of risk-taking in peer review clusters. And so hopefully you might, if you're interested, you might also engage with that. So I'm just going to conclude by saying thank you for taking the time to join this workshop and listen in, and invite you to get in touch if there's anything more we can help you with. Thanks ever so much.